Every business owner wants to know what can they deduct on their taxes, right? Some business owners, you're out there, you're a sole proprietor, you're a single owner LLC, maybe you run a partnership with somebody, or you're running an S corporation. Either way, this video will apply to you so you can have a better understanding as to what's tax deductible and what's not. Um, so just to start, the definition of a business expense, according to like the IRS, right, is any ordinary and necessary expense that you incur to run your business. Now, a lot of people think, well, that's really vague. So what does that mean? Well, it is vague because what is any ordinary and necessary expense to run your business, right? Each business would be slightly different in their own regard. Certain industries, one thing to buy in one industry is not necessary and ordinary in another. But try not to dive too deep and wrap your head around too much of that, because then you can just kind of get lost in the weeds and you just might miss kind of something that's right in front of you. So what does it mean that an expense is ordinary and necessary to deduct in your business? Well, for instance, if we use a lawn care business, for example, a lawnmower in a lawn care business is a necessary and ordinary expense to incur as a person who runs that business. So the lawnmower that you purchase would be a tax deduction. Gas that you put in any of the equipment for that business, that would be a tax deduction. The vehicle that you have to drive for that business would be a tax deduction. Advertising and marketing. Does a business need to advertise and spend money on marketing? Yes, they do. That's pretty ordinary and necessary. Office supplies like pens and pencils and paper. Is that ordinary and necessary? Yes, it is. So those are business expenses. So don't think too hard about what's my write-off? Ordinary, necessary. Well, what does that mean? Look at your business. What are things that you have to buy in order to run your business? What are things that you have to buy in order to run your business? That's kind of the easy part of it, right? Necessary expenses. What about ordinary expenses? For instance, you don't have to spend money on advertising, but ordinarily, you're gonna. You don't have to spend money on office supplies, but ordinarily, you're going to. So a really good question that you could ask yourself when you're thinking, what are some of my tax write-offs that, for this year, this tax season that's coming up? What are some of them? Okay? And or maybe you're just going to maybe go buy something and you're like, is this a tax write-off? Well, what would an ordinary business in your industry do? Like I said, we were using lawn care for an example. If you're in a food truck and you're buying straws and what do you want to call that? Plastic silverware and stuff like that. Ordinary and necessary. So pretty much any expense that you incur means that you have to spend the money and realize the expense, pay for the expense. You're going to incur the expense. Anything that you buy that's for your business, lean more towards tax write-off. And then at the end of the year, if you're put it in a little separate side note or something in your bookkeeping and say, okay, this expense is in here, it's this, and I'm not sure about it. That's when a tax preparer, that's when we can help you. We're not going to sit here and be like, oh, you dummy, no, you can't write that off, blah, blah, blah. It's okay to ask questions, and it's honestly somewhat okay to try to kind of just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, right? And it's kind of up to your tax preparer to be like, no, that's not a deduction. That is, that's not, that is, that's not. And we can kind of go from there. Now, here's when most people get tripped up when realizing tax write-offs for their business, is when you have a thing that you use both for business and personal. Okay? So anything that you buy that's 100% for your business, that's a write-off, okay? I hope that makes sense. I understand the ordinary and necessary thing can be really vague, but anything that you buy for business purposes is a write-off. Now, let's talk about the items that you might buy that you use both for business and for personal. For instance, a cell phone or a laptop or things of that nature, a vehicle. How are these write-offs too if you use them personally? Can you write them off? Do I write off the whole thing? So typically how it works. Remember what I said before I wrapped up, just the general definition of a write-off. If you use that item in your business, it's a write-off. So now when we move over to this other, where we have things and property that we bought that we use both for business and for personal, did you use it in your business? Yes. Okay, so we're kind of checking one box. All right, we used it in our business. We're getting more towards that write-off. What was my business use of that thing? For instance, let's say the most common one out there is a vehicle. Tons and tons and tons and tons of self-employed business owners, they will have a vehicle that they use personally and they use it for business. Very common. So can you write off the vehicle expenses? Yes, because you used it for your business. Now, you cannot write off the whole thing. You can write off the business use percentage of that item. What does that mean? So let's say you buy a vehicle and no, let's not use a vehicle as an example because those rules just get oddly weird and I don't want some person to correct me in the comments about something I was not even trying to go down the rabbit hole. All right, so let's talk about a laptop. You buy a laptop for $2,000 and you use it both for business and you also use it for personal. So how does that write-off work? You use it for business, right? You said if I use an item that I bought for business, I can write it off. But you also use this item personally too. And what it's going to come down to is your business use of that item. How do you determine that? Let's talk about it. So you go out there and you buy this $2,000 laptop. When you're determining business use, don't look at it as, think about it for the words that it is. Business use, and you're going to need a business use percentage, meaning out of the total time that you use this laptop, total time, 300 out of 1 year, okay? Total time that you plan on using this laptop. If you only opened it and turned it on for business purposes, it doesn't matter if you used it one day a week or 6 days a week. If the only time you turn on this laptop is to use it in your business, that is a 100% business use deduction. It's $2,000 it cost you. That's a $2,000 business expense. Now, let's say that throughout the course of the laptop's existence, you buy this laptop and you use it 50% for business, 50% for personal. So that would mean that we'll just use a week as an example. Half the week you're on it using it for business. The other half of the week you're using it for whatever, news surfing, your kids are playing games on it, spouse is doing whatever, who cares? Half the week it's used for business, half the week it's used for personal. That would be a 50% business use percentage, which means that you would be able to get to deduct 50% of that item, okay, on your taxes. Cell phone. This one's always fun because everybody has a cell phone, right? Most people at least. So how does that incorporate? You have a personal cell phone. You probably had your cell phone before you started the business, and then you just started using this cell phone for business. So how does that translate into a business write-off? The same way as the laptop, kind of the same way as a vehicle. How much do you use it for business? If all of a sudden you wake up one day, run your business, you take your personal cell phone, and all you use that personal cell phone for is business, from the moment you do that, all of a sudden all 100% of your cell phone expenses are deducted. Okay? But again, if you use it for half business, half personal, half of your cell phone expenses are a tax deduction. You just figure that percentage all the way through. If you use it 70% for personal, 30% for business, 30% is your write-off, 70% is not. So what it comes down to in determining, what can I write off, you've got the ordinary and necessary expenses to run your business. The expenses that you incur, advertising, if you're running a lawn business, a lawnmower, if you're running a cleaning business, soap, a power washing business, a power washer, an accounting firm, your license fees and stuff like that. Those are all ordinary, necessary, and 100% business use items. So those are all write-offs. Anything expense that you incur that's 100% solely for the business, that's a write-off. 100% all of it, okay? Start getting into things like your laptop and your cell phone and your vehicle. Now you have to start determining what that business use percentage is, okay? What is the business use percentage out of the total usage of this equipment that I use for business? 40, 50, 60%. Okay, we can deduct 60% of the cost of that as a business expense. I hope that helps clear things up a little bit. Tax season's right around the corner, and if you need a guy, I'm your guy.